Well, again, thank you all for being here. I recognize some of your names, and you might also remember me because I've been in some of you inboxes quite a bit in a few months because of research purposes and such. So glad to see you here again. I'm gonna just give you a bit of an overview of what we're gonna do today. Now we are just presenting the speakers, and can you please mute yourself, Stephanie? I think I'm hearing your. Thank you. And we will start with a brief presentation of what we're going to do and the speakers, and then we will move on to a question part where I will ask Dylan, Stephanie, and Bruno a few questions each, and then we will move on to a Q&A kind of session. The webinar should last around 1 hour, so just keep that in mind. And I know that some of you are very familiar with what this webinar is about, and especially with the manifesto that we're presenting. But I know that a lot of you also are not familiar with it, so I will give a very brief overview of what this webinar is talking about. And this overview is a bit of a story in the sense that it starts quite a long time ago, because in 2015, the Urban Cycling Institute started a summer school program. And the summer school program has been going on for quite a few years. A lot of people have participated in it. And since so many people were eager to come back to Amsterdam, we decided to bring them back in June of 2024 and do a 2-day very intensive session of collaborative writing. And the result of this 2-day session with the alumni was this manifesto, which I am holding in paper form. I don't know if you can see it. And it's also available for download, and I will send you the download link later. And sorry, I just dropped my notes on the ground. So very sorry about that. And anyway, it was a very great opportunity, and we have today 2 speakers from that webinar who participated as alumni, Bruno and Stephanie, and we have also Dylan, who was one of the workshop leaders. And I would like to ask you, Dylan, beginning from you, if you can present yourself.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Michaela, and thanks everybody for coming. My name is Dylan. I'm a senior researcher at the Urban Cycling Institute. I have a background in sport and recreation during my undergraduate, and then I went on to do a PhD research in active travel and systems thinking. And yeah, now I work at the Urban Cycling Institute on different research projects here in Europe, in the United States, and also in the Caribbean region, all focused on urban cycling, active mobility, and coming from different perspectives, from governance, public health, physical activity. So mixed bag, but happy to be here.
Thanks, Dylan. Stephanie, do you want to say something about yourself?
Thank you. I'm Stephanie Stotz from Switzerland. I'm a geographer and I work as a mobility planner. I was head of the pedestrian and cycling unit of the city of Bern for a few years, and we managed to double cycling from 10 to 20%. So we had quite a lot of success, which I'm happy about. Now I work for a private company. I'm particularly passionate about creating streets for children. I'm also a mum. I have 3 of them, and yeah, I think that's really at the core of my professional activities.
Great, thank you. Bruno, would you like to share?
Sure. Thank you for the invitation, Michaela. So I'm Bruno Armand. I'm working as a social entrepreneur, working more specifically on mobility and active mobility innovations. So I have a background in marketing and management, and I have been working for different projects in startup industrial companies and large corporate groups, first in the automotive business and now more and more into active mobility. And my last work was at the Lyon Metropolitan Area Urbanism Agency, when I was working for elected officials.
Great, thank you so much. And also to present myself, I am Michela Grasso, and I am a research fellow here at the Institute. And I have I participated in the writing of the manifesto, and I put it all together after it was produced in June, also with the help of other members from the Institute. And I also work as a junior researcher for the University of Applied Science of Windesheim in the Netherlands. And I focus on the 15-minute city. And today we're here to discuss a bit about the manifesto. As I was telling you before, what was so specific and special about the manifesto is that it was co-created by more than 50 people who have very different background in mobility. There were researchers, there were activists, there were people working for private organizations, there were engineers, and they all came together to work and produce these sets of policy. The policy in our manifesto are divided in 7 narratives, and the 7 narratives that we chose represent different angles through which we can understand mobility as a holistic concept, so to go beyond the technicalities and the technical word that is often associated with urban planning. And the narrative we chose were mobility as play, mobility as social interaction, mobility as political, mobility as a necessity, mobility as a south-north nexus, and mobility as commons. So now I will start asking questions to the speaker, but before I also want to point out that we would love to hear your question as well from the audience. So if you would like to ask questions, please use there is a function on the bottom right of your screen, I think, where you can type a question in the Q&A. Or otherwise, if you can't find it, just type it in the chat and someone from our team will then show it to us. Thank you. So I will start by asking Dylan. Dylan, you were the workshop leader of one of our sessions, the mobility as play, which is a really interesting concept. And so you have experienced firsthand what it means to work with such a diverse group of planners who came to Amsterdam in June. And I want to ask you, how was this experience for you? So to lead a group that had such different backgrounds, and how this was helpful or unhelpful in the development of these policies?
Yeah, thanks, Michaela. And just maybe for those who weren't at the workshop, I think each of these narratives, we kind of had the freedom as facilitators to work with the groups who attended the workshop to develop policy actions according to their experiences, according to their perspectives, which was really, really nice. But I suppose the goal of the narrative that we were speaking about in our group was all about mobility in terms of a social and sensory experience in its own right, and creating streets as places for vibrant social interaction. So I suppose that's kind of the platform upon which the group developed the policy actions. And then in terms of who we had there, it really was a mixed bag. We had Stephanie and Bruno, who are with us today, but who kind of come from planning backgrounds in other ways. And also we had those who work in advocacy, people coming from health perspectives, academics. So it was really a group of people who speak different languages, really. All who have a role to play in mobility, of course, but speak different languages. And I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges when you are working with multidisciplinary groups, is trying to get people to speak the same language. And that was probably one of the challenges, but again, a nice and vocal group, which is really, really helpful. I suppose we worked a lot at the beginning of the process to develop a shared understanding of what we actually wanted to achieve by these policy actions. So we spoke a lot about the narrative, the kind of description that I said before, and heard people's perspectives and their different takes on what mobility as play meant to them. And I think that's super important to take in this type of work, is to really hear people's perspectives, hear people's takes, and also develop that shared understanding before diving into the development of policy actions. Because if you don't, I think you can end up with stale, stagnant policy actions that oftentimes don't challenge the status quo. But I think the mixed backgrounds from everybody really allowed us to think outside the box and to develop actions from different perspectives, which was super helpful.
Great, thank you. I absolutely agree. Actually, I was also part of a group. I was helping Mohammed Nazarpour to lead the group about mobility as political. And I remember we had someone from the World Bank in our group, someone from the LA, Los Angeles mayor office, some activist, someone managing a car parking lot. So we had a lot of different perspective, and for a political group that was also quite vocal, but we developed a set of really interesting policy actions. And I just want to mention all these policy actions are in the manifesto. And there are like really a bunch of different ones. They're very concrete and they're very utopian as well, but we will get on this later. And I also now want to ask a question to Stephanie and Bruno, who were participants in the Dylan session. And you had the possibility to read the manifesto before the webinar, and I would like to know if there was a particular policy action that resonated with you, and it can be related to your own experience as a planner, or it can be also something that you wish policymakers would pay more attention to.
Stephanie, you want to start?
Sure. I can. Well, the challenge was hard. Michaela, as I loved all the policy actions from the manifesto, but made a choice. And I think the one I'd like to share with you is the one from mobility as a necessity. And it's to one of the actions is to design your neighborhood as a destination. And I think this is like a very crucial point to start at, if you can start there, or also to elaborate all the policies a city has and really include those neighborhoods. I mean, where people live, that's when you get outside your door, you want to create a space where they can be, where elderly people, kids, anyone can just enjoy and go about the business as they want to. Even introducing business can be interesting in neighborhoods. So this is really one of my favorite actions.
And have you had any experience with this in your work with the city of Bern? Like how easy it is to push forward a policy like this?
Yes, I guess it did resonate with me because the city I work for has already made quite a lot of effort in that field for the last 2 decades. And maybe to share from the city of Bern, I think that was actually the basis, like why cycling was able to take off as it did when the city decided to invest into cycling, as the city had already created quite an okay neighborhood network, a lot of them already at 20 k's per hour, making space for play. There is lots of room for improvement still also for that city, but it was a good point to get started at.
Thanks, Stephanie. Bruno, would you like to add your perspective?
Sure. I will try to make it quick with 1 minute each. Contrary to Stephanie, I was unable to make a choice on a given aspect of the manifesto, so I choose 3 ideas. The first one was prioritize soft modes in transportation plans. The second was adopt legible wayfinding language that enable people to select a variety of road styles. And the third one was create opportunities for various levels of social interaction. So the first 2 was mobility as play, as we define in the group hosted by Dylan. And the third one, mobility as social interaction. And if you allow me to share my screen, I will show you 3 examples that relate to these 3 topics.
Of course, yeah, please.
Okay, I'll make it very easy and simple for you. Can you see my picture?
Yes.
Okay. This is to show you that we have in France 1.1 million kilometers of roads, and 70% of these roads are managed by local authorities. The problem that we have is that most of these roads are not very used. The map I'm showing you right now is a map done by an engineering cabinet called CETEC, showing you the roads that are being used by less than 1,000 vehicles in blue per day in the entire region. Of course, it's a medium, but that's the idea. And you get the idea that not all the region are using the roads the same way. So what's being right now under scrutiny in France is the requalification of certain of these rural roads for active mobility of kids going to high school or universities in peripheral areas. So you see more and more projects where we are trying to requalify through signage and forbid transit of vehicles to push the adoption of active mobility travel to school for bike and people walking. So that's the first idea I wanted to show you. The second idea was about wayfinding. I'm working with a small group of people right now, a small citizen group, to design in each of the small area that I show you, to design minute map for bike and for cycling. This is an automatic minute map that is generated online and which will allow you to get a glimpse of your neighborhood with a given amount of time. The more the map is green, the more it means you are able to do it in less time. So for example, if you choose this map, you can see you can do most of the trips in muscular bike in less than half an hour. But if you're using an electric bike, what you can see now, everything is becoming either blue or green, meaning you're less than 40 minutes away from your destination. And by clicking on this tool, you are able to see through a detailed kind of a Google Maps style system for bike called GeoVelo. It's kind of a Waze for bike. You are able to see the details itinerary by bike. That's the second thing. The third thing, I'm showing you right now the exact path that is being shown online. So you are able to answer the question, okay, Bruno, where do I go to a certain area by using this type of solution? The third solution is a system that we have created, which is a bike trailer that is made in universities for everyday movements. That is pushing a social interaction. Sorry about the music, but that is to push the social interaction in creating mobility common goods and making sure we create alternative narrative for moving in the city. So I don't know if you can see the video, but what you can see is a refurbished bike trailer made by campus students. We're about to make about from 5 to 10 of these in Lyon this week, and they are compatible with any kind of bike service system or any personal bike, either electric or muscular.
Great. Thank you so much, Bruno, for this wonderful explanation. It's super interesting actually to see how the policy action of the manifesto can be applied to real life examples, like really interesting. And of course, I know you can talk about this for a really long time. So if anyone is interested in maybe hearing more about your projects, which are really, really interesting for our webinar as well, feel free to reach out to Bruno on LinkedIn, I guess. So thank you so much for telling us about the projects. And I will like to move on with the next question and ask you, Dylan, about the policy action that we just talked about. Some are very concrete, and I think they can be really shown, for example, in Bruno's example, but some are very utopian and, for example, talk about how we can change our narratives and such. But so this mix of concrete and utopian policy action, I wonder how did this emerge in the sessions, and if you have any memory of it, and why is it so important to keep both these aspects?
Yeah, I think it's important to say as well, like the nature of the couple of days that we spent in Amsterdam last summer was really encouraging big picture thinking and thinking about the future from a utopian perspective. A lot of the time, in some of the conversations we had were super interesting. And I think our kind of brief as facilitators going in was yes to include and discuss these utopian actions and these utopian visions, but to try and make something concrete and tangible of them. And I think one important thing to note as well is that in our group there was somebody called Kai Hall, who was the transportation planner at Washington DC. He worked in transportation policy, in Washington DC, and he spoke the language of policy. And I think he was a big role for the group and helped put shape on a lot of the utopian visions that were in the group. So I think I would be remiss to not mention his role in addition to everybody else in the group. So I suppose that's one of the benefits of working in multidisciplinary groups, is that you have people like Kai who can put make actions from big visions, but also those who are the visionaries of the group are needed as well. But one technique that we did use was this if-then statement. So this was kind of to help us get from these utopian visions or kind of big picture thinking into more concrete policy actions. So this if-then statement approach is used in the development of logic models for program evaluation in public health, for example. But we worked with the group to kind of frame our ideas as, if we want X, then we need Y. And X is often the big picture ideas or stuff that we were talking about, and Y is often something more concrete. So, you know, one example that I can think of in the group that we had was, you know, we want more playgrounds. Okay, if we want more playgrounds, then we need to designate a percentage of the streetscape budget to play infrastructure. You know, and that was one of the policy actions that came out of our group. But I think, just to highlight, that was kind of one of the ways that we structured our conversation, kind of helping dig down into making something more concrete from something more big picture.
Great, thank you, Dylan. This is so important actually to keep a visionary mindset. I think often in planning we forget the relevance of our imagination, and that imagination has a potential that we have forgotten about, and that maybe our predecessors used to have much more than us. And without our imaginatory capacity, I don't think we can plan cities as good as we really can to use our full potential. So I like this a lot about the manifesto as well, that there are all kinds of policy present inside. And now I would like to also ask you, Stephanie and Bruno, about the policy that we are mentioning. There are endless policies that could be added to a manifesto. There can be all kinds of manifesto made about mobility. Is there any action that right now you think should be added to our manifesto?
Do you want to start, Stephanie, or shall I start?
You go.
I think the ability to put our elected official or our technician in each other's place could be interesting. In that end, I believe the field study trips that we do in Amsterdam, Copenhagen, in other countries are very interesting, because they give another insights to elected officials. For example, one of the biggest plan for France, Eastern France, cycling infrastructure, has been voted after one of their big elected officials did a trip in Northern Europe. He decided to put together, I think it was more than 150 million euro investment project after doing one of this trip. So I think the ability to put each other in, to put us in each other's shoes is very important, from the elected point of view to the technician point of view and to the citizen point of view. So I believe this could be interesting. You have some role play who do that sometimes, but I think on the field experience and exchange is very interesting.
That's such an interesting point, actually. And in past years, we have had quite a few municipalities coming to the Netherlands, and some also with UCI, that come to visit the Netherlands to understand how cycling infrastructure works and try to take inspiration. I can't say too much about it, but I think some of these people who came here were really inspired and really moved to bring change back home. So I think it's also important to, if you have public officials who seem keen to do such a trip, to push them and to explain to them why it's so useful to see another environment and to take example from it. Do you want to share your policy action, Stephanie?
Yes, it goes a bit along the same lines. I'd like to add the methodology of co-creation, really, as centering it in planning practices, and also making it compulsory way of working within city governments and with society, and then make it part of the planning process to give those voices, put them on stage. So also, as in, I'm sure it's a bit different all around the world, but in the context I've worked in, then there's always documents being produced that are given to decision makers. And so the voices that were part of this co-creation process should then also be part of bringing the kind of the final document to the decision maker. I'm sure we can be also a lot more creative in how we do that. Like the written word has a lot of weight, which can be good in some places, but also to be more creative in how this actual then decision making at the end is happening, and like I said, putting those voices out there, that they don't get silenced right at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And also, if someone from the public, because now I've finished the questions I wanted to ask the speakers. So if there are questions from you, please write them in the comments, like in the little message board. And I know that a few people from the audience have been at the forum and have participated in the writing of this manifesto. So if any one of you would like to come forward and turn on your camera and your mic to tell us how was your experience, and yeah, please feel free to do so. Otherwise, we'll continue with more questions. Okay, I think nobody wants to come forward. I will not call names. I see you, but it's okay. Right. Is there any question that you would like to ask us from Urban Cycling Institute or Stephanie and Bruno about their experience with writing the manifesto? No? Okay.
There is a
Can I ask a question to Bruno?
Of course.
Okay. My question to you is how the manifesto writing has shaped your work in the last, 1.5 years or so?
It helped me, the manifesto writing helped me to organize my ideas. I tend to go a little bit everywhere when I have some ideas I want to defend. So the manifesto was very instrumental in helping me structuring the different tools I wanted to deploy on the field. You cannot come with a toolbox full of lots of things when you go see elected officials. You have to go to the point with certain targeted things. And I believe the manifesto was helpful in helping me design these little drawers and try to put one tool in each drawer and not a bunch of them. So I think the manifesto was very instrumental in showing that you cannot handle everything at one time, and you have to focus on certain efforts. Hence the tools I showed you, I try to focus my energy on with the group of friends I'm working with.
Thanks, Bruno. I also see that someone has asked a question, and maybe you want to answer, Stephanie or Bruno, because Dylan has already kind of said what it was for him to work with different people as a workshop leader. But how was it for you as participants to work with people who have very different background from yours?
I always find it very enriching, and particularly within the setting that the Urban Cycling Institute has provided, sort of having that space to also get to know other people, not just within the workshop session, but also outside it. It made me aware that creating something like a manifesto is not just a professional work thing. It's also about creating connections whilst doing it and outside of that particular room. So this is something that I became aware of. For the difficulties, I mean, practically also language. If you work with people, so there's the professional language, which can be different, but also not everybody speaks English with the same levels. So also sometimes stepping back and really taking the time for somebody to explain what they mean, sort of can be challenging, but is also a good thing to learn. So generally, I wouldn't say I found it difficult. On the contrary, I found it a very enriching experience.
Thanks. Do you want to add something, Bruno? Or
No, I think Stephanie mentioned most of the things I wanted to say. I would just add that it's very refreshing to be with such different agents of change all put together. You already mentioned that we come from very different backgrounds and expertise, but I think it was interesting to see that some people were focusing on strategic policy making. Some others were more into operational thinking and prototyping things. And I think it's interesting to have the different layers, the different level of thinking. In the first group I was with Dylan, first of all, we mentioned a lot of strategic things, and I was a bit lost because I was like, God, I'm not sure I can say what I want to say. But when I started saying a couple of operational examples, I was reassured to see that it was fitting. Hence the appellation, the name of the drawer I was saying. It could fit, not everything, but some of it could fit. And I think it's interesting. It's also refreshing to see that some ideas can work in some countries and cannot work in others. For example, if you don't have, at that time, we had a big state founded policy for cycling infrastructure. It's coming back, but at that time we had more money. It's easier to push things in certain timing as well. I believe we're also sometimes sensitive to timing, political timing, just for certain things. So what could be done in Europe at that time was interesting. Now maybe it's less the case, or we have a less big of a dynamic going forward. So comparing this is always refreshing because you can see there are some constraints in some countries abroad, and right now it's another context for us as well.
Thanks, Bruno. I see maybe a question that could interest Stefan in the comments. They're asking, how can cycling infrastructure be suitable for hilly landscapes? And I think Bern is quite a hilly city, right?
It has some hills. First of all, the experience is often there are not as many hills as people may perceive. I'm aware that there is some cities like that are really very, very hilly. We have Lausanne, for example, in Switzerland, very steep slopes. But they've decided to go into cycling just recently, about 5 years ago. They had a mode share of about 1%, and they managed to get it up to 5% in 5 years. And I'm telling you, this is steep hills, so it shows if you want to do it and you allow people to cycle in a safe space, yeah, they maybe just push the bike up the hill. Sometimes you also come up with technical help, like you have some trams going up and you allow people to take the bike on there. For the experience of the city of Bern, like I said, it's actually not as hilly as you think. It's one of the narratives to break at the beginning. There's this notion of a place being very hilly, and if you look at it, you maybe find out that a lot of the terrain is still quite accessible by bike. And then you just decide what type of city, what type of public space you want, and you design for it, involve the people, and they will love cycling also in hills.
Great. Dylan, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I could probably add something from the perspective of one of the projects we're working on, particularly about the point in the question about is cycling infrastructure worth it? And I think you could probably give a researchy answer to that and say, what do you mean by worth it? But if one of the projects that we're working on, it's in Bonaire in the Dutch Caribbean, which is a small island, where there are 25,000 people, 20,000 cars. It's quite small. But contrary to the example of Bern, it's flat, it's sunny, and as I said, it's quite small. But the density of cars to people there, the high rates of non-communicable diseases, the high rates of physical inactivity, I suppose it's our job as researchers working with society and working with the residents and stakeholders there to argue for a policy to help minimize these societal problems that the island is facing. So in that context, we would argue that cycling infrastructure is going to be worth it. But yeah, that's the battle that we're facing. But I think each context is different. What you mean by worth it, whether it's from a health perspective or an air quality perspective, I think that's for cities and groups of stakeholders to figure out themselves.
Great. Thanks, Dylan. And also people think that cycling in the Netherlands is easy just because it's flat. It is also a very particular environment because it's always raining and it's very windy. So don't underestimate the flatness of the Dutch landscape. It can also be pretty tough, but I think that's a more complex social situation here with the cycling habitus and everything. I see someone has asked how we plan to incorporate the 50-minute city plan into the policy and the manifesto. I just want to say, answer quickly. We have a lot of policy related to proximity planning in the manifesto. So planning for proximity, neighborhood as a destination. So there is a lot about it in the booklet. And there is actually a really interesting question that maybe one of you would like to answer. Someone, Hugo, asks, how can activists professionalize their expertise, helping government officials while demanding better infrastructure? So does any of you have an idea of how activists can reach government officials and collaborate with them?
Yes, you want to go first, or shall I?
If you want to start, I can try to complete afterwards, maybe.
Okay. Nice. Also here I can share a bit of the case of Bern, but also what I've seen elsewhere. One thing is that activists, I feel, can have a lot of confidence in their knowledge and expertise of users. That it counts what they feel, what they see, how they experience the city. So not hold back with that knowledge. It is valuable and very important in developing a cycling city. That's kind of from the part of the activists. Then look for the connection and the contacts with the city officials if that is possible. On the other side, you of course also need a government that is interested in hearing and listening to those opinions and involving activists. So in a good case, it becomes like a working group where projects get discussed together, where activists help make projects better. It is also not to underestimate that activists and generally the society provides the legitimation for a government to actually push those boundaries. I mean, it's also people working there and they may also want to support it and they face challenges. So having all those people in the background asking for it and saying, yes, this is what we want, it also gives strength and courage to the people, who have to go through all these lengthy processes and then get it done.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Maybe for adding your perspective to it.
Do you want to share your, Bruno?
Sure. To complete with what was said, I believe it could be interesting to go into either your local, national, or continent-wide cycling association. For example, in Europe, it's the European Cycling Foundation, the ECF. That could be interesting in pushing certain policies. I believe inviting pioneers, I don't know how you pronounce that, could be interesting. I'm thinking about Janet Sadiq Khan, for example, who in the year 2000-2010 in the city of New York did a lot of things for cycling. I'm talking also about Melissa Bruntlet, who has been a very interesting voice for cycling infrastructure across the world. I strongly recommend that you follow her LinkedIn account alongside her husband Chris Bruntlet, because they've been writing a lot of books on this. And also I would mention organizing events. Either state-run event or local event is always a good showroom for you. For example, we have this program in France that has been launched about 4 years ago, which is called Mai à Vélo. I'll just put it in the margin here. This is a platform in May during 30 days where you can list any event related to bike in your neighborhood. This way you can attract elected official, journalists, citizen-led projects into showing what they have to show. It's very interesting. And they also organize challenge mobility. This is more done by the region, where each employer, I think it's in the first semester 1 day and the second semester of each year 1 day, encourage each salaried employee to come to the work by bike. And you can have points, and if you have a lot of points in your company or in your structure, you can get a trophy. So this small action allow you to show what you do, and also, of course, the field trips I was mentioning earlier on. This can help the executive official to understand their role and the role they have to play for the future.
Thanks very much. I see there are more questions. There is one in particular that is about the increasing danger and threat to vulnerable cyclists outside of the Netherlands and Northern Europe, and how, if there is any work being done on this. I don't know if maybe, Dylan, you feel like you know of anything being done, for example, in the US, or any project that is going on. I don't know.
I suppose not off the top of my head, but I think one of the projects that we're working on here at the Urban Cycling Institute, led by Lilian Markford, who's here in the call, is in Bentonville in Arkansas, which is kind of not where you think a cycling haven would be, but I think the impact of a private investment in one small town in that state in the US has done huge things for cycling safety, cycling culture, and I suppose we're currently conducting a study on this that hopefully we'll be able to publish some results soon that hopefully can answer your question. But I can't think of any other concrete examples in the European context off the top of my head.
No, but it's a great example that you gave about the city in Arkansas, actually. And I don't know when more information will be available on the UCI website about it, but once it's there, I encourage everyone to read about this project because it's really interesting. And I would say to answer the last question that we have here about the culture war that is happening in a lot of countries. Germany is the example here, but I think it's quite common throughout Europe and also the world in general. So this culture war between cyclists and car drivers, and how can we present an alternative model that counters these ingrained cultural and economic ideas? Does any one of you would like to answer and conclude then the meeting?
I can give it a stab. It's a good question.
All right, very good question.
Yeah, I think this is kind of at the core of what the manifesto is trying to do. You know, each of the different narratives around mobility is trying to approach and develop actions towards mobility from multiple different perspectives. And this manifesto is not kind of a one-stop shop. It's not going to fix every city, but I think what it can do, as Bruno alluded to earlier, is help organize your ideas and a useful tool to help apply to specific contexts. And yeah, I think gaining momentum and like what the culture war and the culture around cars and the stigma, the negative stigma often associated with cycling and walking, kind of flipping that on its head is systems change. And I don't think that's going to come overnight. You know, it's going to take potentially multiple political cycles, number of years to help kind of shift that culture. And what we can do, I think, is to, build momentum, take the easy wins, whatever they are, whatever they look like in each of the contexts, and help build momentum to hopefully change that system and that culture over time. But I don't think it'll happen overnight,
Yeah.
If I can add a word or two, thank you already for that perspective, Dylan. For me, it's all about the next possible step and make it as big as you can. So I do believe there is action possible for everybody, and there's so many fields also needed to overcome this narrative, this negative narrative, this focus on cars that we're faced with. And I think it takes so many different people. It takes art people that show us a different world, it takes, of course, political support to, to fight all those laws and legislation and the big cars coming in there. You need politicians, and you need lobbying groups that stand firm and, have all the people at the back. But it also takes the human part, connecting with people who are actually on this car side, because if you connect as humans, you find out they maybe also cycle, they maybe also have kids, you take them to a place that is unsafe to kids and say, look, now we don't talk about the big stuff, we talk about the personal stuff, can be a way. So there's so many layers to go into, and I'd just like to encourage everybody here to keep going with that work, and because I feel it when I'm with you, how it's, how the momentum builds.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, for this great answer. And I just want to remind, it's so important to have a community and a network of cycling enthusiasts around us. Of course, UCI is a very good community, but there are many other countries. There is critical mass that offers a fantastic platform in many cities to connect with other activists that do also work at often institutional level. So that can be a great way to push for action. And of course, the UCI is a great platform as well, and we also offer a lot of possibilities to connect. We also have a few scholarships, for example, for the summer school, which both Stephanie and Bruno have done. And also we have scholarship for our conference that is happening in September, Cycling Research Board. We are accepting abstracts right now, and we're also accepting applicants for the summer school. So you can check out our website. And we also have a summer school in Spanish for Spanish-speaking people, and in Italian for Italian people. So there are a lot of possibilities. And thank you so much everyone for coming. If you would like to purchase an ebook copy of the manifesto, someone will send a link in the chat, but I will also send you a link in the email afterwards. If you are just curious about understanding how the manifesto is looking like, we will send you also the possibility to download the first chapter for free, so you can get a sense of it, and this will be for the first 10 days. And then in the next week, we will also give the possibility to order a physical copy of the manifesto. We are still trying to figure out the printing and shipping, because of course a lot of the people that follow UCI live on the other side of the world, so it can be quite hard to connect with everyone. If anyone has any comment, please, you can say something now, otherwise I will close the webinar.
Thank you for the organization.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you, Stephanie and Bruno.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Dylan, of course.
Bye, everyone.